Men and women are different. It's not saying one's better and one's worse or vice versa. They're just different. You know, I can show you a dollar bill, and I can show you a Susan B. Anthony dollar. They're both dollars. They're different, but they're the same. But at the same time, they're different. So it's kind of a hard thing to understand because all you have to do is go to your television, turn on a show, and see on a lot of shows how men are being presented. And I'm getting a little out of line here, but that doesn't matter. And I don't want to be bashing feminism because feminism has a lot of laudable and wonderful goals. They want to see a lot of things, equality. They want to see people lifted up to equality, and that's fine. But there is an arm of feminism that's very radical, very vocal, and very man-hating. And it desires to remove the roles of men altogether. They've managed to infiltrate our media to show men as bumbling idiots who can't even get dressed by themselves, can't feed themselves, and they're not, and that group of people is not seeking equality, they're seeking superiority. They're literally saying, we don't need men. And that's not God's way either. And that group is just as bad as the group of men who wish to marginalize and keep women in bondage and submission. Two sides of the same coin. God designed men and women to work together, not to fight each other. Not to fight each other. And again, marriage is probably one of the worst places where this concept of submission has hurt untold hundreds of thousands of men and women. Men are necessary. I'm in prison ministry. I'll tell you, statistics are staggering. Men are necessary. Men are necessary in family life. Don't believe the world that says that men aren't necessary. They are. The statistics for homes without men in them is just unbelievably staggering. Terrible. Terrible. The kind of trouble those kids get into because they have no male influence. Men are important. And women are very important too. But that's the wonderful thing about God's plan is that He's brought two diverse sets of characteristics together that when they meld together, they provide a unique environment to raise children. The ideal environment to raise children if the parents can come together in biblical submission. Submission really is, now let's go back just a little bit. Don't let the issue of authority and submission become a wedge to destroy that oneness, that unity in marriage. Because I guarantee you, just as submission is important to the kingdom, I guarantee you lack of submission is equally important to Satan. Anything that is important to the kingdom, the opposite of it is equally important to Satan. God has a plan for your life. Don't think that Satan doesn't. He does. He does. He keeps a little file. He keeps a little file of all the things you've done wrong and all the failures. And he just loves to go to that little file and look stuff up when you're feeling down. He's got a plan for us, surely as God does. And if he can use submission to authority and submission to each other to become a wedge to create problems, he'll do it. He'll do it. He's looking for any opening. Anytime you take offense at something, look at it and see what God has to say about it. If the concept of submission offends you, you need to ask yourself why. Because it's God's plan Not something I came up with this week. It's right here. It's not my deal, it's God's deal. God came up with the idea of submission. It's a misunderstood concept that a lot of people think it means becoming a doormat. Anybody ever think that? Excuse me. But we have Christ, like we talked about before. Christ, who the Bible tells us, at whose name every knee will bow in heaven and on earth and under earth, submitted his will to the Father. And we follow his example. And as we become more willing to obey his command to submit to others, we subordinate our rights to theirs. In a marriage relationship, husband and wife are both called to submit to one another. For the wife, this means willingly following her husband's leadership in Christ. For the husband, listen, husbands, because nobody ever goes on the other side of that equation. For the husband, it means putting aside his own interests in order to care for his wife.
That's right.
Submission is rarely a problem in homes where both partners have a strong relationship with Christ. If they both have a strong relationship with Christ, they're more concerned for each other's happiness than they are their own. That's a Christ-centered view of relationships. To be more concerned for the other person than we are for ourselves. Biblical submission is based on love. Why did Paul tell wives to submit and husbands to love? Pray for me with this cold's trying awful hard to get the best of me here. It's interesting that Paul told wives to submit and husbands to love, because research has shown that what women want most of all is love, and what men want most of all is respect. Paul already had this figured out 2,000 years ago. He didn't need a college degree to figure it out. But perhaps Christian women who really had a new freedom in Christ, I mean, this was revolutionary stuff 2,000 years ago. This is a revolutionary concept. Everybody's equal. Revolutionary concept 2,000 years ago. But perhaps women found submission difficult. And men were used to the Roman custom of having unlimited power as the head of the household. And they may not have been used to treating their wives with love and respect. A new concept for them. Both husbands and wives should submit to each other, just as both should love each other. Now, this being a new concept, biblical submission really attacked the root of slavery, in New Testament times. In Paul's day, women, children, and slaves had to submit to the head of the family. Slaves submitted till they were free, male children till they grew up. Women, basically all their lives. So this is a little bit of a new concept, that there was an equality amongst all the believers in Christ. In Galatians, Paul says, there is neither Jew nor Greek, slave nor free, male nor female, for you are all one in Jesus Christ. But he didn't suggest overthrowing Roman society to achieve it. He counseled believers to submit to each other by choice. Wives to husbands, husbands to wives, slaves to masters, masters to slaves, children to parents, and parents to children. This kind of mutual submission preserved order and harmony, and at the same time increased the love and respect among the family members. So really, Jesus planted the seeds in the New Testament times during his ministry. He planted the seeds that would ultimately